Thank you very much. It is such a pleasure to be here. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed last night and this morning. Seeing the work that you're doing, hearing your commitment is so invigorating. There's nothing like working with people on the ground who are actually doing the work instead of talking about the work. I work in Washington, D.C. with a lot of people who talk about the work, but it's awesome to see people who do the work. So I'm going to start by telling you a tale of two students. So the first student, his name is Andrew. He's in the second grade, and he comes home from school. It's actually my son, and he's so excited because he gets home and he's like, "Dad, my teacher gave me this code, and I can use it to learn math at home, to practice math at home on the computer." So I'm pretty excited because usually Andrew doesn't come home excited about learning math. That's a first. And he's excited to get on the computer, and I'm an ed tech guy, so this is all going very, very well. So we go over to the computer, we throw the books on the floor, we log in, and we go through 85 little dialogue windows, which should have been a sign. This is not headed to a good place. And we get to the extra awesome math practice, and, oops, got to turn on my clicker. Scanned in PDF math worksheets. I was angry because not only are you spending more money and making it harder to do it than just if you did it on paper, but you are teaching my kid that technology doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. It's not going to make anything better or interesting for you. Horrible experience. So my other son, Ethan, he's in the fourth grade, and he gets this assignment. Hey, the teacher says, you need to help your fellow students learn about the weather. And you can do it any way you want. And it's due on such and such date. You can use any tool you want. Go for it. So he comes home, and Ethan is a scratcher. Do you guys raise your hand if you know Scratch? Okay. For those poor among you who don't know Scratch, you need to know about Scratch. So Scratch is a free, I'm going to start with free because I know you're all educators, right? It's a free website set up by MIT where you can do block programming. So this is a block language programming where the kids drag and drop programs. And you can use it to make this awesome cat do all kinds of cool things. And people have, they've rewritten Minecraft in Scratch. There is no end to what you can do. So my son's a Scratcher, and he says, "Dad, this is what I want to do. I want to make a head-to-head quiz for this this weather assignment." So one kid will be on half the keyboard, the other kid will be on the other half the keyboard. I'm going to show a question, and then they're going to choose, and whoever does it faster gets registered. And if they get it right, they get a point. They get it wrong, they lose a point. And I said, "Ethan, I don't know how to do that. I can't help you with that." And he's like, "I'm not asking for your help, Dad. I'm just letting you know what I'm going to do. And I need you to email the teacher and tell her what I'm going to do so that she can have the projector ready to go." Yes, sir. So he did this all on his own, programmed the whole thing himself. I contacted the teacher. She was so awesome. She brought in the ed tech coordinator, thank you very much, to get it all set up in the classroom. And he did it, and it was an amazing moment for him and for his other classmates. So what does that have to do with the ISTE standards? This story of these two students. Well, I can tell you, when you look at the ISTE standards, and they were so awesomely introduced already by Francis, when you take my first students, when you take Andrew's experience with the PDFs, that meets exactly 0 of the ISTE standards. Not one of the ISTE standards is met by what happened to him. If you take Ethan's assignment and his experience, it actually meets every single one. Now, not everything you do that's awesome with technology is going to meet every single ISTE standard, but the point is that the ISTE standards can tell the difference between bad ed tech and good ed tech, and they can help you make those choices and guide you in the right direction. And it underscores a really important point, which is that technology itself is neither good nor evil. I mean, how many times do you have this conversation with somebody? Oh, technology is ruining our family, it's ruining our society, it's ruining our democracy, right? I happen to read a lot of a lot of bios of former presidents, and I'm telling you, this is not the worst we've had it in our democracy. It's been worse. But technology, what technology is it's an accelerator. It makes what you do go so much faster and so much bigger. And if you are going the wrong direction, you're going to go bigger and you're going to go spectacularly bad. And if you're going the right direction, you're going to go big and you're going to go spectacularly good. It's sort of like money. A lot of money does not necessarily equal a lot of good taste, right? It just makes your taste bigger. And in LA, I think you have a few examples of both versions of that. So one of the great things about the ISTE standards is they provide a vision. You don't know who you can become until you can see it, right? So when I taught an internet science camp in 1996, that was a long time ago. The internet was pretty new. And I wanted these were middle school kids, and they were from low social economic backgrounds, and I wanted them to understand what the power of the internet was. And I wanted them to be able to see themselves in a STEM career. And so we got on this awesome listserv where women who were scientists all communicated with each other. And we said, would you be interested in talking to a bunch of middle school kids about your jobs? And they all said yes. We actually had more women scientists than we had slots for. And so we all got on a group chat, and this is way before AOL or anything like that. And they actually, I had middle school girls asking questions of female scientists who are working on the Mars rover. It was amazing. When you can see what you can become, then you can get there. If you can't see it, you can't get there. And the ISTE standards provide a vision. And they really ask an important question, which is not, are your students, do they know how to use technology? Do they know how to work this tool? That's not the question the ISTE standards ask. The ISTE standards ask, who are your students becoming? If you look at the ISTE standards, it's actually a list of roles. It's roles that you want your students to be able to master and be competent in. Are your students empowered learners? Are they digital citizens? Are they computational thinkers? Are they global collaborators? Are you preparing them to take on these roles? As a result, the ISTE standards are used in many, many ways for curriculum mapping, lesson design. We have states that have adopted them at the state level. Texas has adopted them, Vermont, Connecticut, Wisconsin's looking at them. They're really used to guide work. The second thing about the ISTE standards that I think is incredibly important, it's already been mentioned here today more than once, is they are learning first, technology second. Now, this may seem intuitive that the first thing you do is set your learning goal and then you bring the technology in, but I can't tell you how often this has gotten wrong. In fact, I'm going to ask you, how many of you have seen technology first, learning second implementations? Raise your hand. Yeah. And whole countries do this wrong. Like, there are entire countries who have bought tens of thousands of devices, shipped them off to schools, and the schools had no idea what to do with them. And they just sat there and got older and older and older and dustier and dustier and dustier. I think this is something everybody can relate to. Now, I'm not dissing on the need for technology and infrastructure. We absolutely need it, and it needs to be absolutely reliable. But it's your table stakes. If you have this, you've got a car with an engine on, right? But it's not going anywhere until you add learning and leadership. When you add all four of those together, then you can get there. So the next thing that really strikes me about where we are is that the most innovative things that are going to happen with technology in schools, they have not happened yet. When I started the department, 30% of schools had broadband to the classroom. Over 5 years, we got that up to above 90%. It's the biggest change that happened in K-12 education in those 5 years, period. I mean, ESSA being passed was up there, but that only happened at the end of the administration. If you think about this, A teacher is not going to use the internet as a mission critical part of her classroom until she's got the bandwidth she needs and is 100% reliable. Most schools didn't get there until last year. So most of the innovative uses of that technology haven't been tried. They haven't been done because they haven't been part of the classroom. It's just been down the hall. It's been a gadget. It's been a nice to have. And oh boy, I better have a backup plan because if the internet goes down, I'm sunk. That is changing. Another area, yep. You can't hear me? Need to hold this closer? More like that? Okay. I feel like Bono. Should I just go for it? Give me a note. Don't give me a note. Active use of technology is absolutely key. If you look at the way technology is used, there have been studies that have been done for previous decades that show that in lower social economic circumstances in schools that serve those children, they use technology more passively than in higher social economic schools. And the studies also show that the more actively students use technology, the more they learn, and at the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, they learn better and they learn more. This is absolutely essential. It is not enough to bring the technology into the school. If the students aren't using it actively, they're not getting what they need out of it. It's the equivalent of taking like a F-16 fighter jet and driving it down the highway. You can do it. It will go, but it's not going to take you where you're going to go. It's not going to make the difference. And there's some pretty significant hallmarks of whether you're using technology actively or passively. I've been in classrooms where I've seen little kids with little headphones on sleeping in front of their computer, in front of their screen. That's a fail, right? That is passive use of technology. When you turn that around and you ask the students to solve, to communicate, to collaborate, to create with technology, then you put them in a place where they can really make the difference, and they will learn more, and they will do better on the standardized tests. So I want to give you a picture of some of what the standards mean, of who they're describing. So this is Brian Christensen. Brian Christensen is a middle school student, 8th grade. He was in a class. His teacher was teaching them how to design games. It was a really cool class. And he was using something called Game Maker, which was one of these block, I lost the word, block coding interfaces. And he was so frustrated because he couldn't do everything he wanted to do. And the teacher said, you know, there's real code behind the block code. If you lift up the curtain, you can see the code. And he's like, what? And so the teacher showed him that. And he started messing around with the code underneath the code. And he got really good at it. And then a publisher came to his teacher and said, hey, I want you to write a book on Game Maker programming. I understand you're an expert. And he said, yeah, I am an expert, but I actually know somebody who knows more about it than I do, and I'd like to make him a co-author. And I said, who's that? His name's Brian Christensen, and he's in the 8th grade. And if you look, that's Brian's name on the cover of the book. This is an empowered learner. But look what it took. It took an empowered teacher to let him do that, right? Students come with this kind of energy and this kind of potential, but it was the teacher who unlocked that. These are some creative communicators. So Maplewood Richmond Heights Middle School is in Missouri. It's a relatively urban setting, but there's a program where they go out into the Appalachians so that they can have some experience up front and close with nature. But the school wanted to push that and say, I want them to learn about STEM concepts while they're out there. But they did it in a really interesting way. They said, we're not going to make science over here. We're not going to make it, lab coats and safety goggles. We're going to let you explore science in the way that you're comfortable with. I'm going to make sure I'm going to make it over here. So what I love about this, again, there was a teacher behind this. There was an educator. And the educator said, bring who you are to this experience. Bring what you know. Bring it with you. I'm not going to set up science culture as more important than your personal culture. We can blend these two things, and you can make something creative and something that reflects who you are. So the third one is global collaborators. So Lopez Island Middle School in Washington, state of Washington. Has anybody ever heard of them before? So it's actually, oh yeah, you actually have. So this is an island off the coast of Washington. They are pretty isolated, but that didn't stop their instructors, their educators from becoming a global collaborator. So what they did is they teamed up with school children in France, and they worked together on a project to identify World War I casualties, American servicemen who were buried in France. And they have hundreds of graves around the country, and really all they know is their name and the date that they died. And so these school classes work together to do the research, find out who they were, and tell their stories. So here you are on an island off the coast of Washington, and you're collaborating with students in France, telling this story of the history of your country and the bravery of the people who fought for both countries. Again, they didn't have to go anywhere. This didn't require new tech. It just required the imagination of the teacher to think about what was possible. So in addition to asking what your students are becoming, we have to ask, who are your educators becoming? Who are they becoming so that they can keep up with their students? And we have, in addition to the ISTE standards for students, we have ISTE standards for educators. And you'll see they're designed the same way. We recently updated them, so they're brand new. And they really think in terms of roles. So the first part is, how do you create an empowered professional who's a leader, a learner, and a citizen? And then how can your educators become a learning catalyst? And when you first see these, a lot of educators don't get up in the morning and say, I'm an analyst. It's not how they picture themselves. But they are an analyst. They analyze data constantly, every day, all the time. They are an analyst. They may not think of themselves as a designer, but they are. They design lesson plans, they design activities, they design all the time. And when they are able to start thinking of themselves in these terms, they start to realize that they have capacities they didn't know, and they have areas that they would like to grow in. So there's a school called Elizabeth Forward. It's in Pennsylvania. It's a rural school. I've been to it. I can tell you we drove for a long time on a school bus over lots of hills and valleys to get to this place. It was far, far away. And they have made this transformation. They have all their teachers firing on all cylinders. And I just want to give you an example of what they're doing. So they decided they want to do something that was interdisciplinary. And so they all work together throughout the entire school, and this is the project they came up with. It's the students learn to make a candy bar, but this is how it goes. The first thing they do is they prototype with their 3D printer what the chocolate's going to look like. And then they use vacuum molding to create molds for the chocolate. And then in their food lab, they actually create the chocolate and they flavor it, and then they pour it into these molds. So they're manufacturing the product. Then they Photoshop the package design, print the label, put in the nutritional information. They have a spreadsheet of the production costs, the revenues, so they can set a price point. They develop a 30-second iMovie commercial with a green screen to market their product, and then they sell their chocolate in the school. Is that awesome? And again, it's just, I think I lost the room. It's so amazing, right? And you think about that, yes, they have a 3D printer. Yes, they have access to iMovie. It's not that there's not tech there, but this isn't like VR, augmented reality, off the charts, thousands and thousands of dollars. This is a bunch of teachers coming together and thinking together what they can do to do something amazing. I'm going to skip that. Do you guys need to sort of talk about that for a minute? That's awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to how. How can this be done? So ISTE has the standards for students, the standards for educators. We have a community, an online community that you can join for free. You don't have to be a member of ISTE to join our standards community. We have digital learning pathways that walk you through the different standards. I am announcing today, and I'm not sure how marketing is going to feel about this, but we are right now piloting an ISTE certification for educators. So, you know, there's a Google certification, and there's a Microsoft certification, and all kinds of certifications, but those are all tied into individual brands and individual tools. We're creating a certification in the ISTE standards that helps certify the competency that you have to choose the right tool and to make those decisions, and doesn't associate you with a particular brand or company. Super excited about that. We're getting a lot of enthusiasm. And it's a great way, you know, what we're hearing is some schools say, hey, you know, we have ed tech coaches, but, you know, we just like christened them like last week. And they're like, okay, what do you want me to do now? And they're wanting to run them through this certification program so they can sort of help them understand the breadth and scope of what they're doing. We also have something called the Verizon Mobile Learning Academy. And this is where cohorts at the school level, including your principal and your leadership team, go through and walks you through the process of planning and executing a one-to-one program. So this is another thing we have available to you. It's 10 weeks, 25 hours total, and gets you ready to go mobile. Who's been to ISTE? Woohoo! The rest of you, I'm so sorry. You gotta come. It's in Chicago this year. It's amazing. I call it the Disneyland of EdTech because the energy there is out of control. And what you find there is not a bunch of people saying, VR, VR, AI, AI. You find a bunch of people saying, this is where VI makes sense. This is where VR doesn't make sense. This is where I make sense. This is where AI doesn't make sense. It's a great place to be and a great place to meet your tribe. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the why. We are facing some of the most dramatic changes in the workforce structure that we will see in our lifetimes. An Oxford study says that 47% of US jobs could be replaced by AI. I mean, just think about that for a minute. 47%. I'm a fanboy of Elon Musk. You know, he just released an all-electric semi-truck, which already has the capability to run autonomously. If you just put all the truck drivers out of work, that is millions of people, millions of people. And this is happening in every part of the industry. It's an incredible revolution, and it's coming. It's not going to stop. Think about the kids in your classes. Think about the students you're teaching. Are they headed to a job that's going to be replaced by AI? It's a pretty sobering thought. A lot of them are. Are you familiar with the new Amazon Marketplace? You walk in, you grab the stuff off the shelf, you put it in your bag, you walk out, and it bills you. I'm not kidding. There is no human involved in that transaction. That's a lot of jobs. Have you ever seen an Amazon warehouse? It's 95% robots. The people just do the quality check. Can you imagine once the AI does the quality check? We're done. So think about the jobs that your students are likely to get and ask yourself, am I preparing them for a job or am I preparing them for unemployment? The second big thing is the gig economy. Gig economy, does that mean something to you? Raise your hand. So this is the idea that rather than having a job that I go to every day, I generally work at home. I generally have digital tools that I do my work with. I'm a graphic designer, and I get my jobs online. And I work online, and when I'm done, and I move on to the next one. It's, you know, Uber is the gig economy, right? I come in, I light up, I take all the jobs that come to me, I shut down, I go home. There's no company for me. It's just me picking up the work that comes. There's incredible changing. 27% more jobs are moving to the gig economy than payroll employees. We need to prepare our students for this future. we're in a time of unprecedented digital convergence. If you think about cultural convergence, economic, political, I mean, the election, the stories about the election are scary, right? And they represent a convergence around digital life, a social, political, digital world that is so contained that you can influence an election based on Facebook posts. This is the world we live in. It kind of feels like this. Did you ever feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose? I feel this way. So for me, the remedy is we have to create digital creators. We have to change the equation. We have to turn this story around. So this is my dining room. There's always a cereal bowl on the table for some reason. It doesn't matter what time of day or night it is. There's an empty cereal bowl on the table. And this is my dining room in Blender. My 13-year-old son created this. Blender is free. Blender is also the same program that professionals use to create virtual environments. I didn't teach him anything. He got it all on YouTube, and he made every one of these as a geometric shape. So this started as a sphere, he turned it into a bowl. These started as curved lines, he turned them into metal. This lamp didn't have any light in it. He had to put the light in it, and then he had to adjust the opacity of the shade to let the light shine out of the shade, all by himself, all with professional tools, all at his fingertips. This is Marcin. Marcin is a recent immigrant. His parents are both immigrants. Struggles a little bit with the language. And he, using Autodesk, which is free for high school kids, anybody can download Autodesk who wants to, designed a fuel-efficient car. Marcin is legally blind. If you think about the potential for these digital tools to level the playing field for our students, to help us close equity gaps, to put everybody on the same footing so that Marcin can pursue his dream of being an engineer just as well as any other student his age. It's incredible. I want to turn this to this. And to do that, you've got to turn the screen around. You've got to have the students stop being consumers of digital content and start being creators of digital content. You have to put the tools in their hands. And once they're creating and they're making and they're designing, then we turn the equation around. As consumers, we're just going to pay more and more and more to be entertained. As creators, people will pay us. I know of a high school student who used AutoCAD, learned it in high school, and then he got a job designing parts for a steel plant that he had never visited, that he'd never been to. It was hundreds of miles away. And he would do rough models for them, and then their professionals would clean them up. And he would save them 80% of the work and save them hundreds and hundreds of dollars, all in high school. He had the best high school job ever. The reason that I know this is so powerful is because this is also my story. I grew up in rural areas. We didn't have a lot of resources. And when I say rural, far away. And one summer I was in the 4th grade, I'd been spending my time like floating sticks down the gutters in my neighborhood, which was fun. And my dad had had enough of it, so he dropped me off at the university where there was a computer lab. It was in the engineering part of the university, and he just dropped me off there and said, computers are important, you need to learn about them. And I don't know that he knew a lot more than that himself. And so I went in, and there were students there, and I started watching what they were doing. I looked over their shoulder, and I started learning code. I learned to code, and I started typing out my little stuff, and I had a question. I asked the guy next to me, and I typed it out. And then one day I ran a program on a computer. And for the first time ever in my life, that computer did what I asked it to do. It was obeying me. That changed everything for me. It was like having a superpower. suddenly my background, my lack of resources, the fact that I was living in the middle of nowhere, it didn't matter. I had powerful digital tools. I could do amazing things as good as anybody else with those things in my hand. And a day I will never forget, because the students turn over, right, every semester. I didn't. So when the next group of students came, I was sitting in the lab. And they're like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I'm just here. If you need some help, let me know." But the day I will never forget is when one of those engineering students turned to me and asked me for help. And I helped him figure out what was wrong with his program. And I went and I sat back at my computer, and I was just like, I can do anything. And so what I want to share with you is, if we do this right, if we turn the screen around and make our students digital creators instead of digital consumers, you are giving them superpowers. You are teaching them that they can do anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. South. Those were very powerful words. And although you mentioned how impactful this can be for students, what resonated with me was when you talked about your parents, and your parents saying, "I just know this is important. You got to do it. Figure it out." And that reminds me of a lot of the parents that we encounter at our trainings at the schools, right? You have a lot of parents that definitely agree our students need to have technology. They want to make sure they come to the training so they have access to technology at home. But you tell them, "How do you use the computer? Do you know how to use the computer?" They'll say, "No, I don't want to touch it. I don't want to break it." In some cases, they're extremely intimidated by it. They see it as something that they don't know what they can do with it, but their children can use it. And I think that's one of the really powerful pieces about the trainings, because through the process of having their teachers show them how this is, yes, very helpful for their students and how they're going to be using it so they understand how they can take into consideration online safety so they're not scared of what can happen to them. They also start to see how it could be a resource for them. And, when they find out that they can see grades, that they can connect with teachers, that they can really be more comfortable in what's really a whole new environment for them, right? Going to middle school from elementary school, that puts them at ease. And that, I think, has a very powerful impact on our parents. So that's one of the things that resonated with me, and that's the work that you guys are doing during the trainings. I think that's why that's important. So anyway, so thank you again, Dr. South. And now that we have this opportunity, I would like others to, if they have questions or anything that you want to share that came to mind as you were listening to the presentation. Ms. McPeak, yes.
First of all, Joseph, you did an amazing job of delivering a powerful message while we're all being served. So that is another feat. Thank you so much. And our wait staff did an amazing job of getting us food while you're speaking. So thank you to all of the wait staff for coexisting with us as we're learning. So I actually I wanted to ask you sort of two questions if you wanted to comment. One was, so after 8 years at the federal level, is there anything you would do different or differently, I guess is the right English? And the second is then, with all that insight and what you've observed here that we're doing, how would you accelerate all of the progress that's being made? So both of those questions, Joseph.
So those are great questions. So I think that one of the really important things I learned at the federal level is that you really have no power. You aren't in charge of anything. You can't make anybody do anything. States control education. Local school boards control schools. You know that better than I do. But what you can do is you can set a vision, and you can pull in partners. And the most effective work we did at the department was when we brought in public-private partnerships. And you know all about this. Because once the community gets involved, and I mentioned this last night, parents are an unstoppable force. You cannot stop a parent. They're like technology, right? If they're going that direction, you can't stop them. And if they're going that direction, you can't stop them. And if you can get them on your side, you can make a big difference. And really, it was when we were building the capacity among the parents in the communities that we had the most impact. So if I were to do it again, I would have worked even harder to do that. Politics is local. It's not national. And we should have worked harder at the state level and the sub-state level to make the changes that needed to be made. As far as what you can do to accelerate, that's a hard question. I mean, you're all in different places on this journey, right? So it's hard to give sort of one answer. Involving the community, though, really is key. A lot of times, so this is what I would say. Make a plan to involve the community. That's my answer. Don't just do it ad hoc, but sit down and say, how are we going to brand what we're doing at our school? So when we were at the department, we came up with the brand of Future Ready, right? And if you noticed, it was not Obama ready, right? It was not Arnie ready. We kept that brand out of politics, and we intentionally chose a neutral brand that would appeal to anyone. And we said, take this brand to your community and ask the local, hardware store, how do you want to help my students become future ready? Here's a list. Pick one of these, right? And the communities that did that were able to bring all kinds of resources into their school. And more importantly, those are the people who vote for the school board members who make the decisions, right? And by being intentional and planning your community engagement, I think that's a really powerful way to accelerate the work. Open to other questions or comments or reactions. Yeah.
So with that state testing, will also be very standardized, and we're on the other side of the classroom. We're trying to push towards more creation by our students. How do we reconcile those two things, especially when for a lot of us we're a small charter, our aspects really matter. And
Yeah.
how do you balance that?
Yeah, it's a tough question. So you didn't ask me this question. I'm going to answer it anyway, because people ask me, "Do you believe in standardized testing?" Right? Or how could you work for the administration who pushed it so hard? I will tell you, we have to have some standardized testing. If we don't, you will literally never know whether the kids in Alabama are learning differently than what the kids in Massachusetts are learning, because governors will just move the graduation standards down. And they did this. This is historical fact. It was only when we had national standardized testing that we could actually tell how your students in your state were learning versus other states. It doesn't have to be every kid. It doesn't have to be every year. We can use statistical models to sample. We can make it way less painful. And if we do this right, we can do it in real time while we do our regular testing, not at the end of the time. Sorry, I did not answer. Go.
It's great because this may have me thinking in terms of, is there a way for us to take that standardized test and make that a little bit more authentic, where we are having students create in these assessments and applying some sort of movement model?
Yeah, and so I agree. And what I found is when teachers will go back to the state content standards and actually read them, and most educators haven't, frankly. It's the truth. They're just, it's just something they're beaten with. It's not something that they understand. But if they'll go back there, one, they find out, oh, I'm already doing most of this stuff. So it's empowering. And then if they design based around that, you can still do really creative, interesting things that meet the standards. It just doesn't match the textbook version of the standards. And so I think the textbook, pre-made instructional materials obscure the potential that we have to do creative things that match standards and that will still score well on SBAC. You start talking about textbooks and it just kills the room. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead. You on the mic?
I just want to thank you so much from the standpoint of being a principal for so many years, a teacher, and a parent. What an incredible job you're doing. I think you hit the mark when you're talking about what's best for children. It's not about politics. It's not about the district. Is about the child. And I think when we put ourselves in that kind of a sense of what's best for children, we all make the right choice. So ISTE Standards has been incredible. We're, as a district, I work with Sophia and Dr. Gibson. We're in charge of the professional development, and we are really supporting the schools and little by little transforming, right? Because like you said, an administrator, a parent, working together, that team effort makes a difference. So thank you so much for your great insight, for your experience, for what's happening, because we are transforming education. And I think that this was such a valuable time for us to spend, because I have gone to conferences, but this I have gained so much insight. So that's going to help us with the professional development and to making sure that the teams of schools that participate, that we work together, we move forward. And so we're in the right place at the right time, and let's give them a big, big applause. Good job.
You can ask me hard questions too. Oh, great. I was hoping for one. You want to come on up?
I just wanted to thank you for bringing real life examples of how we can really integrate technology and not have it just be this replacement. I think the thing I appreciate most about your presentation is the real world experiences that I think some of the teachers that you highlighted offered. It would be great to be able to bring some of that to our schools. For example, being able to like go on a trip or something like that. And so it would be nice if we could talk, I mean, this is obvious, this is probably not the time or space, but for example, I was trying to get, I was trying to get a trip for my students to go to New York and DC, and found a lot of complications with like as far as the law goes and the district, and trying to provide those real life experiences. A lot of the times there isn't much support to like get those things to go through. So I was wondering if you could say anything about that.
So I have some thoughts, and that was a great question. So I think a lot of times we overlook the possibilities in our own community. So, you know, I told this story about, you know, the working with the students in France and telling the stories of these veterans, or sorry, I keep thinking of them, they are veterans. They also gave their lives for their country. But, you know, there's veterans in your community. Has their story been told? How hard would it be to create an assignment for your middle school students to find a veteran in their community and interview them and record the interview and edit the audio and then turn that into an episode that then you share, you know, on SoundCloud or on some platform. There's a lot of communities where they actually have their students who are learning about graphic design or marketing. They go and they find local nonprofits, and they consult with them. They do a project for the local nonprofits. There's programs where you can get an app development platform, and then you develop an app to meet a need in your own community. Or or just telling the history of your community. You know, some people have taken just the art, the you know, the graffiti and the other folk art in their community, and then they've turned that into a website. And so I think it's so easy to jump to big things, right? Because you're like, I want to do something amazing. I want to just show my kids the world, right? But if you can show them the world in their own community, if you can show them how there's a richness there that they can explore and that they can be spokespeople for, then that can be a really powerful experience as well. And once you've done some of those things and you have something to show, it's easier to get grants to do, you know, larger things that go further afield. So those are some thoughts.
So I'm wondering, with the ISTE standards and a lot of things you're explaining, I feel like a lot of it's a mind shift. It's a big change, and for a lot of teachers that have been teaching for 20 plus years, this kind of shift is really difficult. And I feel like, you know, a lot of times it's just one PD talking about this. You know, maybe it's inspirational, and then we just move on with the school year, and then everything just gets, you know, to be the same and in one ear out the other. Wanted to know if there was any kind of resource or PD or organization, something that can tap to help to implement and to get these standards integrated.
So I'll answer that question, but let me first just talk a bit about bringing these ideas into a school system. So one thing that I really hate to see is sometimes we shame the veteran teachers who are reluctant, who don't want to go there, and we just roll our eyes and we're like, we got to drag them along, and you just, you know, they you know, and then you sort of talk about them behind their back and all those things, right? You do that. Well, I don't know if you do that, but I know people like you who do that, and it's not you. But, you know, if you think about this change, it's actually really hard. You know, I can still remember my wife took me, when we were newly married, to a Lindy Hop workshop. So do you guys know what the Lindy Hop is? It's a dance. So we go into the Lindy Hop workshop, and everybody's Lindy hopping. And I try it, and I fail, and I try again, and I fail, and I try again, and I fail. And they're like, we have some special people who can help you over here to figure it out. Could you just come over here, and we'll help you figure that out? And so then I did it with them again and again and again, and then they started looking at each other, and I realized I was a hopeless case. I was scared. I was embarrassed. I was threatened. I was not in a place where I was going to learn or change or do anything good. It was horrible. That's what it feels like for a teacher that you're bringing technology to. So one, let the early adopters iron out the bugs, iron out the bumps before you give it to the late adopters. Don't make that a bad thing. Being last to the table doesn't have to be a bad thing. When you're there last, you're there with people who've done it, with people who can support you, with people, and with a system where we've already figured out how to reset the password, and you're not going to have to deal with that. The first people did, you don't. So I think just, you know, giving people room to absorb it. And then as far as resources, ISTE has a ton. You know, I think the Mobile Learning Academy that I described is a really powerful program that you go through as a cohort with your principal and your leadership team, and you work together to plan and then execute on your one-to-one plan. We also have, you know, books, and we have PLNs, professional learning communities, that are organized around different topics. If you become an ISTE member. And so there's sort of like it's like this hidden tribe of people that are the ISTE members. There's 17,000. And if you join that group, then there's a lot of possibilities there. We're also starting, don't tweet this, but we're starting an online portal where we're going to make some more of these resources available.